You're listening to The Dating Den with dating and relationship badass and best-selling author Marni Batista. Every week, you'll get the raw truth from top experts and real people on the important dating, sex, and relationship issues you want to know about. So if you're ready for true talk that's authentic and unfiltered, and you're not afraid to be called out on your stuff, then you're ready for what's next.
The Dating Den, episode 81 with Robert Kandell. How to date and create deep connections with the good guys in the Me Too era. Ladies, welcome into the Dating Den. I am so excited for you to be here today. I was talking to my guest, Rob, who you're going to meet in a minute, who's a freaking genius. And I was saying that when I talk to women, when I leave the den, I feel like y'all are really super frustrated with men. They don't step up, they ghost, they're flaky, they want to date younger women. There's just this litany. And I just thought it'd be really cool to bring someone on the show who speaks, he said he's multilingual. He speaks man, he speaks woman. He's going to help us understand what's happening right now with men so that you can deepen your ability to make connection with them. So that being said, let me bring into the den and introduce Robert Kandell. He's a veteran of many, many worlds. He spent time in corporate America. He had himself a startup business. He even had a small computer shop. But then he went on to build an international 8-figure business based on relationship, intimacy, and sexuality. And he currently has a successful consulting firm, and he's helping small businesses to become marketable and profitable. So he's a man of many talents. He's also an accomplished teacher, a coach, a lecturer. And for the last 14 years, his mission has really been, and I love this, and I know you love this, to help men find themselves and use their internal power to live their best lives. He is the host of the well-known podcast, Tuff Love, and he's also currently writing a revolutionary book called UnHIDDEN, a book for men and those who are confused by them, which is us as women. So welcome to the Den. I'm super happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
So my first question for you is this. What's going on for men? I mean, there's just this challenge, I think, of being a man today, in the 21st century. And I just spent a lot of time in Europe and looking back at medieval and castles. And it's men wore armor and they fought and they protected. I mean, there was just this understanding of what it meant to be a man. And it's just transformed completely. And women are out there today, they're confused. Men are confused. What's going on from the man point of view right now?
I think it's a tough time to be a man. And I think the toughest part about being a man is people look at men with the patriarchy and their entitlement and their privilege and think you have absolutely nothing to complain about, worry about, or even think you have anything wrong. And so what that does is it creates a society of silence where we're taught to play small, to hide our feelings, to push it down, which is part of the problem, is we don't have a space to talk about our challenges.
So that's really interesting. So, so if you're a guy today and you're in this corporate environment, right? Or I have a friend, actually, he's been married for 20 some odd years. And he's always challenged in his very long relationship. And what's interesting is, he came from corporate. He's like, I need to be ambitious. I need to be this. But he's got this sensitive side to him. And he almost feels like there's no space for that. So then he doesn't feel like he relates to other men because he doesn't want to have those, let's talk about sports and boobs. So what do you do? I mean, what's it like for a guy who's got both those things going on? Or is he hiding? Is he ashamed? Is he shut down?
Well, he's definitely hiding because society teaches him to hide. Men are not bad just because they're men. We're taught to withhold, to be stoic, to be the guy in charge, And then we're also taught to be sensitive and warm and, connectable. But then women want us to be strong and powerful and a caveman, and we're not sure what to do and how to do it. And because men are not taught that emotional intelligence has value, that we're not taught that it's okay to explore your feelings, research and talk about it, what we do is we go with logic rather than emotion, which is very disconcerting for women.
Absolutely. And you said something really brilliant, and I'd love to know what you think about this, is that, I have clients all the time, and they're like, I want a man who's emotionally intelligent. And then he'll talk about his feelings, or he'll tell them, what he's scared about. And they're like, completely get turned off. Like, I want you to talk about your feelings, but I don't really want to hear about your feelings because you need to get over it.
Well, what happens there normally is that women do not want to be a mother to their man. They want to birth children and they want to experience motherhood through their children, but they don't want to carry a man. But a man is just, and I'm not blaming women, I'm not blaming man, I'm actually blaming the way we're taught in society. And because men aren't taught to understand and feel and to notice, we're not sure about our impact. We're not sure how we affect the women in our lives. We either go one extreme or the other. And then women just get annoyed because that's not what I want right now. But we're trying to figure out logically what you want. And we don't have the emotional acumen or awareness of what, to bring our feminine side, our masculine side, or a mix into the conversation. We just don't know what to do when.
So as a woman who's out there dating and trying to create connection, and she runs into one of these guys, right? Like, I just talked to a client and she's dating this guy. They decided to be exclusive. And she's like, he just doesn't talk or share, right? Like, so if you're in one of those conversations, is this something that you can facilitate by showing up on dates or in relationship differently? Or is it just like, nope, this guy's just, close the book. He's not going to do it no matter what.
If a man is willing to expand his repertoire, if a man is willing to say, yes, I'd like to explore different sides, I think he's a keeper.
I love that.
It's not on a woman to force or cajole or manipulate a man into his expansion. But most men really do want to learn, but they don't feel safe expressing that they want to learn. And so what they do is they put their best face forward. They put the facade forward. I've got it all handled, instead of saying, wow, I want to learn. I want to expand. So the best thing a woman can do is just overtly say that I want to be in an evolution with you. I want both of us to personally expand and grow. And I want to do it together and give that guy permission to be in a space where he does know what he's doing, so we can learn what to do to be a better partner.
I love that. When I was dating after my divorce, my ex-husband was like, very alpha sort of corporate-y guy. And when I was dating, I was like, I really want a guy who's, and it wasn't even like you have to have like strong emotional intelligence, right? It was like, I want someone who wants, like you said, to be in that evolution. And I think so many of the women that I talk to, they're like, well, he hasn't, he doesn't know how to do it and I don't want to teach him. And so therefore he's out. What I hear you saying is that that if you create that space to know that it's safe to explore that, and you said I think he's a keeper. Mm-hmm. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, you don't want to be the teacher or coach of your partner. That is a bad combination. And there's so many schools out there and so many options and so many fun things to explore. I mean, just the concept of Meetup, if you're in a major city, can offer you all these different places to go together to try new things. And my wife and I, we're explorers, so it's really easier for us to go. But we end up in some really boring, awful places. But then we're just like, oh my God, that was so much fun because we went together and because we said yes and because we tried in the mutual desire to explore and expand. Then we can learn one thing or two things or 10 things or 20 things to make our relationship better, which expands our lives.
I love that. And there's that core common value of exploring, right? Which is, like women are dating and they're like, he has to have these 5 things, and none of them have anything to do with like a core value like that of being open or exploring or wanting to grow. So I think that's huge. So let's talk about this because I think it's really relevant. And it's the Me Too world that we're in. You know, I'm on social media and I just see there's like these women who are trying to be really strong and they're like almost angry, you know, about what's going on. And I feel like it could be perceived as men bashing. And then they feel like that women are just being quiet and not saying anything. And so it just would seem for a guy who's in this world now that it would be really confusing and create a lot of uncertainty for men. So what's going on? What are men talking about? What's going on for them as they start to explore being a man in this environment?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that before Me Too, the world for a man was changing really dramatically. So things started to happen in the 1970s and 80s where society was creating programs for girls. And I use girls deliberately as being under 18. So they were creating programs for girls to catch up, to equate, to create equality with boys and men in terms of science, in terms of programs. There are all these programs in schools that were created. Now, I think this is awesome. I mean, truly, truly needed and important and powerful. And I'm a big yes to it. But, and this is the but, they didn't create the equal sides for men. They didn't create programs for men to deal with communication, to deal with intimacy, emotional intelligence. They didn't create the complementary programs. So if you look at the statistics, when it comes looking at girls and boys, girls are quickly far surpassing boys across the board. Excellent books out there called The End of Men by Hannah Rosen, The War Against Boys by Susanna Hoff, Men on Strike. There's all these different books that show the deep statistics around the challenges and the up-leveling of girls and the decreasing of boys. So what's happened in the 21st century is we're seeing really pretty significant changes in terms of statistics. In the 1970s, 65% of college entries were boys, or I guess young men, 35% were young women. Now it's flipped. 65 are women, 35% are boys. The pay gap, which was 64 cents in the 1980s for all women, for millennial women entering the workspace now is 93 cents. So not still equal yet, but a significant change. And what's happened is girls and women have more choice, whereas before they were sort of a prison to not make choices. Now they have a choice. And the choices are significant, and they're choosing not to go get married. We're getting married later. There's more single people in the United States, adults, for the first time in history this decade. People are choosing to have kids later or not at all. So there's all this epic change that's been going on for the last 30 or 40 years. Then, to answer your specific question, Me Too comes around October 2017. And what it did is gave women permission, finally, to let out all that rage that's been underneath the surface for generations upon generations. Again, I think Me Too is awesome. And I think it's so important and so powerful. But the effect it's had on men who are already kind of on the ropes from these changes, they're just like, I don't know who to be as a man. And what they're doing, instead of standing up and climbing the mountain, they're quitting.
Yeah.
And there are people like, why bother? I can look at porn. I can play video games. I can hang out with my bros. And instead of stepping up the challenge of meeting a modern woman, they're shrinking. So again, I don't say this to belittle men. I'm just describing what's happening in society. And as a woman, if you're seeing this, I'm hopefully giving you some reality, some statistics, so that it will fit what you're seeing in your personal lives.
Wow. So, what do you do about that? Because I think what's different for women is that they are blaming men. You know, it's like, man up. You know, I watch, TV, or I listen to things or read it on social media, and it's like, you're a grown ass man. Like, there's something like, be a man. So, why are women blaming them, and what can we do to support a man in? It's almost like a reversal, right? Like, they're back in this, like we were in the 70s being like, who am I? So what do you do? I mean, because blaming is not going to solve the problem.
Well, the first thing is that women need time and space to let out all this anger that's been hidden and pushed down. So I once wrote an article about men and their privilege and, the reasons for it. And I got flamed on Facebook about it. And I couldn't understand. I was like, I'm kind of writing a pro-woman report here. And they picked out different pieces. But what I figured out was that they just need time and space to finally feel and let this anger out. Now, letting that anger out on men is not the optimal way to use this energy. And we need to provide space for women to do the internal work, to feel the anger, to process it, to acknowledge it, to allow it. And then when they're ready, which could be in 5 years, I don't want to rush this, but at some point, women have to forgive.
Yeah.
They have to forgive from the spot that it's a noble thing to forgive. Forgiveness is for them and for their psyche. And they have to forgive the past trespasses of the patriarchy.
Yeah.
And so in that forgiveness, then they can reconnect to men. Men at the same time have to do their internal work. They have to see how their brothers and fathers and grandfathers, created this situation for them. And they have to acknowledge that this is the price to pay. But instead of shrinking and saying, well, where does she just need to get a better attitude? Be more generous, be more chivalrous, be more manly, have more presence, create space for women to have these feelings, and then forgive themselves for the trespasses of their ancestors. In that forgiveness, there's a possibility of reconnection, and in that reconnection, there's a possibility of intimacy.
Wow. Like, ladies, this is like one of those where you hit the little arrow back a couple times so you can rehear that. I mean, because, one of the things that we do in the work with our clients is there has to be forgiveness, right? And depending upon your generation, we have listeners who are in their, 30s, and we have listeners who are in their 50s and 60s, right? And so there's a lot of shit that's gone down for those women as they sort of wake up and go, I'm alone. I want to have a connection, and all of those experiences that you've had. And so what I love about what you're saying, and I think everyone needs to really embrace this, is that moving away from blame allows you to take responsibility and do whatever you need to do to get into that place of forgiveness, self-forgiveness, forgiveness of others, forgiveness of like you said, the way that society has taught us to be, and it's evolved. And then to have some damn compassion for men, right? Because I mean, it's like, God, it's so confusing. It's just so confusing. So I really, really get that. So there's a quote here that my team came up with that is, men are acting more like boys and women are more like men. And this is like, if I were to ask women, which I do almost every day, what's not working in your love life? This is what they'll say. These men are acting like boys. They don't follow through. They ghost. They don't want to have conversations. And they are like women who are just being the CEOs of their little dating life and being like, come on, didn't you get the memo? Like, I don't have time. Let's do this. It's causing chaos.
Well, women, like I said, in the 70s, 80s, had the invitation to connect to their power and their place. And what they did to do that is to connect to their inner masculine. So I use masculine and feminine is very different than man-woman. Some men have very strong feminine aspects. Some women have very strong masculine. In my viewpoint, everyone has a ratio, a mix of masculine and feminine that evolves throughout their life. And a well-balanced person knows when to bring out the feminine and when to bring out the masculine. Like my wife brings out her masculine when dealing with the kids. Forward motion, action, planning, getting them from point A to point B. I watch her bring her inner masculine, but the rest of her life, she really enjoys living in her feminine, which is more her natural state. So we all have this combination of it. And so what's happened in the workforce as women have entered the workforce, they've enforced and built up their masculine, which is awesome because they've gotten to the point of where they're deserving to running companies and more women's top CEOs in the top 500. It's still a minority, but it's growing. And what happens is they're not able to leave the masculine at work, and they're bringing that masculine home. They're having trouble transitioning to finding that balance of their feminine. So they're getting stuck in one place or the other. And what's happening to men is they're actually being still in their masculine, but there's kind of a younger, less powerful, diminished masculine. And we've had this really bad switch, this toxic switch of women stuck in their masculine and boys retreating because they don't know how to act or interact with a woman with an empowered masculine.
Yeah. And again, it's like you said, nobody taught them, right?
No.
Well, and we're all sort of pioneers here, you know, because we're leading the way and we don't really have a lot of great role models. People ask me often, you know, like, do you have any couples or strong women, men, like that someone could say, like, what does it look like to be in a modern, healthy, intimate relationship? Like, where do people look to find out what that even looks like?
Well, there's some, but not many. So it's challenging. I work very hard. I spend a lot of time in my relationship with Morgan to provide space for both of us to expand and grow, which is challenging for both of us as we're both really explorers and we both have this strong desire for expansion. But the way to build a modern, strong couple, a relationship, is a couple things. One is patience, which is in short supply because of our past wounding, our childhood wounds, or our ancestral wounds, or what we were taught by our grandmothers and mothers and fathers and grandfathers. So you need a lot of patience because growth doesn't happen with a snap, and it definitely does not happen when you scream at a man up. Yeah. That's a threat. That's a mother's threat that brings us back into our childhood wounds. So you need patience. And if as long as a man is willing to move in the direction of evolution, my belief system is to reward them. And I'm not saying like big, just a step of approval. Wow, thanks for working on that. And even if he miscues, we did this exercise at one taste that I started where, man's rubbing his shoulders and the women would say like, oh, that's great. Can you go a little harder? And the guy would massage and then be like, okay, now can you rub my arms? And then deliberately he'd massage her neck. And we taught the women to say, thank you for massaging my neck. That feels good. But what I really would love if you massage my arms. What we do mostly is like, you're an idiot for massaging my neck.
Yeah.
And that's punishing. The man is in motion. He's still massaging you. He wants to please you. Men are tinder kegs of affection looking for a place to go off. And if you can just say, thank you, that feels nice. But what I really want is that's a way to retrain a man to touch you and to be with you and have presence with you the way you truly want it.
I think that's so great because then you're in that space. Also, you're not defaulting as a woman to that mother role, right? Which is like, you idiot.
Scolding.
Yeah, scolding, right? Like you're a bad boy. And it's just, and it's really takes mindfulness and compassion, right? Like to really connect to the fact that this is a person. And I think women, I speak for the people that I work with and that are listeners. It's like, and I mentioned this to you before, it's almost like there's so much, especially with online dating, right? It's so transactional, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's no patience when it's transactional. He obviously doesn't listen. He doesn't know how to, he's out. It just becomes no patience, transactional, everyone's replaceable. It's that dehumanizing. Mm-hmm. So, okay, so we got patience. What else can we do besides patience to be a really healthy couple?
Humor and curiosity together. Like sometimes Morgan does stuff and I'm just like, that so goes against every single part of my masculine brain. I have absolutely no idea why she's doing the things she's doing with the children, with her life, with the house, with spending, and so the masculine side of me arises, which is sort of dominating and domineering. That was my training as a boy of the 70s and 80s, is to, beat down things I don't understand. And what I've done is I've retrained myself to be humorous and to have curiosity, to first ask, okay, why did you make that choice? Or why did you say that thing? I'm confused. That goes against my programming. And I can tell you 99% of the time, and I mean this, she's done something smarter, much smarter than my masculine brain would have in that situation, especially with raising the kids. And so I learn, and I'm so grateful. But if I didn't go in with humor and curiosity, the first thing is she would get defensive and we'd be fighting about my communication, not the thing. And second, I'd be robbing myself of the opportunity to learn, to expand from a brilliant, developed, creative woman. And so humor and curiosity across the board, no substitutes. If I feel angry, take the time to deal and figure out why I'm triggered before I have that conversation. Use my support system, use my therapist, use, my friends to talk about it, and then approach it from, okay, I want to understand. And in that humor and curiosity, there's deeper collaborative communication rather than antagonistic.
I love that. This is so interesting. Like my husband is a stepdad to my kids. And so now they're in their 2022 and one just graduated from college and we're driving back from her graduation from college. We're talking about her new job. She's going to move to New York. And he's like, so when does this whole like moving your kids into their new house thing stop? I was like, but he said it like, really curious, and I realized, he really is asking. He's curious. He's not like this needs to stop. So I was like, well, here's the thing. Like for me as a mother, like my expression of love is that thing of like, oh, let's buy new dishes at IKEA. Can I help you make your bed? It's like a nurturing mother feminine thing. It's how I express love. And he was like, oh, that makes more sense now, right? Instead of like me going like, why are you asking that question? Right. And so it's that curiosity and having that ability for both men and women to understand. This is what I hear you saying is that men think differently and they actually literally don't get us.
They literally have no idea what you're doing most of the time.
Say more about that, because I feel like this is like, highlight this, people. This is important.
So women tend to think that men think like women. So a woman will change her hairstyle, and all her girlfriends immediately can see that little, 2 inches off her base to, just like that little thing. And then she'll prance in front of her husband or her boyfriend. And the guy's like, oh, it's really nice to see you. You look happy. And she'll shake her head and like the obvious things for a guy to see. And guys are just not trained to notice those 2 inches of hair. I still don't notice the 2 inches of hair. It's just not part of our training. We're focused on different parts of the body or the energetics. But then women will get mad because they think the men see. They think the men withhold, and the men's being a jerk by not saying your hair looks great. And they'll actually get mad at the man because we're not acting like their girlfriends. And instead, the guy just isn't trained to see those things. And that goes across the board from emotions to belief systems to ideas to concepts to conflict resolution. And a woman's inability to see that a man thinks and's been trained differently is the detriment, because then it, like I said, it gets antagonistic rather than the curiosity and the hipping up of a man. And like, when this happens, I'd love for you to do this. That's how to build the really deep intimacy with a man who just doesn't know.
I love that. A man who just doesn't know. Okay. Last thing. I want to talk about sex really before we end for this round, because I'm definitely having you back on the show.
Okay.
Okay. So my daughter, teenager, in a relationship, decides she's having sex. She goes on this big adventure. She puts on a few pounds. She comes back and she's like, I feel really uncomfortable being intimate with my boyfriend because he's going to notice that I've gained some weight. And I was like, men notice different things, like the haircut, right? So when women are intimate with men and they're like, especially women that I work with, they're a little older or they're a little whatever, and they're like, my boobs are this and I've got cellulite. And when I get in that one position, you can see the rolls on my stomach. What are men like? Do men give a shit about that in bed? Like, is that something that a woman should really be concerned about and using as a reason not to be physically intimate with someone because of their own physical insecurities?
Complicated question, multi-level answer. So the first thing I want to say is a man responds to a woman's confidence as much as her physical appearance.
That's huge.
Right. So if a woman walks in thinking, I'm fat, I'm pudgy, I'm soft here, this is an extra 2 pounds, that's what he's going to feel without even knowing what he's feeling. He's going to notice that she kind of withdraws or hides her body or pulls in her body. And that's the least sexy thing, because he wants a woman who's open and happy and exploring and confident. So I'm not saying, again, this is an easy thing. You can snap your fingers and build confidence. But the first thing that women shoot themselves in the foot is not knowing that he's responding a lot to your belief system about yourself.
Amen.
Yeah. So the second side to give validation to the women is men are very visual creatures. And we do notice things. And there is a percentage, even a large percentage of men who have judgments and viewpoints about older bodies or heavier bodies or softer bodies. And so it's true. I have a client who's in his 60s who is just interested in dating women in fit bodies in their 30s and 20s and 30s. I'm not here to judge him. It's his viewpoint. He's tried. And those are the kind of guys, you just have to recognize those kind of guys and not try to date them if you're 40s and 50s.
You make it so simple. See, that is something a guy says, right? Like, it's just, that's not your guy. So pick a different target market. Brilliant.
Well, it's not even a target market. It's like, and this is something I think it's really important, is women need to know their boundaries. They need to know their bottom lines of what's acceptable in a guy for them to date. What happens is that we have this viewpoint of scarcity. I'll never find a partner. I'll end up alone. No one will ever love me. No one will ever understand me. And that's the part of our psyche that's running the show. Rather than what I recommend is this total belief in yourself that you are perfect and beautiful, that you deserve a man that worships you, who you are, the way your body is, the way your mind is. That's the kind of guy you require to be in a relationship, especially to go to bed with. But because women have scarcity, they limit their beliefs, they minimize themselves, they keep themselves small, they bypass their boundaries and end up angry when the guy doesn't treat them the way they want to be treated, because they won't treat themselves the way they want to be treated.
Mm.
So create a high bar for men instead of a low bar. And here's what I found in my life and the people I coach. When you set that high bar, you tend to attract people at the high bar. When you have a low bar, you tend to attract people at the low bar. So give yourself the belief system and then see what happens. Experiment with it, play with it, and see if you actually have the kind of guy that's going to love you, regardless of those extra pounds or those softer parts of your body. And I think you'll be surprised with actually how much success you can find.
That's amazing. I love this conversation. I think you do an excellent job of being multilingual, by the way.
Thank you.
Your wife is very lucky. That's so awesome.
I am too.
You are. I love it. So I appreciate this conversation. And I think that for those of you who are listening, it's like there's that patience, there's that compassion, there's that understanding. And then the other things that Rob said, we're really talking about, the pieces that you can take responsibility for, like forgiveness and self-compassion, forgiveness of others, being confident, having boundaries. And that if you resonated with that, like, what's your bar, and you're looking at the kinds of guys that you're attracting, re-listen to this episode and look at, are these some things that are in my control that I can do so that I can expand who I am today? And it is the 21st century. It is all different. We all are pioneers. And I just so appreciate that you are here, Rob, like really representing the minds of men and women. And I would say as a woman doing so very accurately. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And if you guys want to know more about what Rob is doing, the link is in the show notes. And in the meantime, ladies, I've said it before, let me say it again. Date with some damn dignity. We'll talk to y'all real soon. Bye.